here going forward. There's Ryder. Perfect. There we go. Nice. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
There we go. Good deal. So can I please get a approval of the agenda or any changes to the agenda? Trish, thank you. Any amendments to the agenda that anyone like to add? Well, we do, like I said, Mike Penner being pushed. Okay.
Dusty, it's Mike here. We had spoken earlier about appointment of the chair position. We'll have to add that to the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I was gonna do that under, well, new report, new business, but we may as well do it at the top of the hour. My 2021 is proving to be 10 times more difficult than 2020. I actually wish to be, I'll do 2020 over again, the way that this year started off and it's going. So with that, I'm regretting to say that I am asking to step down as chair of the board. There's so much going on now. It's every day. Like last night, I was delivering Popeye's chicken to guys in Woodstock. And this morning, we're trying to run a business and be ready for more arrivals. And I'm unable to fulfill full duties for what I feel the county and this board needs. It hurts. And I was hoping to be able to do everything, but COVID has made that difficult more than I can handle. So with that being said, I would like to stay and remain on the board, because there are items that I do feel very passionate about, including the Norfolk County 45 bridge, the carbon tax letter, and others. But with now tree bylaws and whatnot, I feel like I cannot be the chair that this county and this board needs, and as well as for what my businesses require me to be there for because of this. So with that, I am handing in my resignation as chair, if that is legal and possible. And I'd like to see what the next steps are for the board to make sure we can proceed forward.
Sure, Dusty. So I guess I'll take over here just in a short time. We can have a nomination period and a vote for our new chair. Would we have any nominations to come forward? And feel free to speak up because I cannot see everyone's hands.
Jacob, Mike here. We
Yes,
do
sir.
have a vice chair. Hayden Dooney's the vice chair.
That's true.
If I'd like to hear his comments with respect to taking over chair, if he'd like to put that forth, please.
Sure.
So myself also, I'm going to echo what Dusty's just said. I got a huge amount more complications here this season versus last season. I don't have the staff to be able to run my own operation here at the moment working, and yeah, like Dusty said, I was the one in the tractor in the sprayer last night until 1:30 in the morning. So I'm running short on time to be able to support the position as well, and I would also say that I'm running short on time to be able to support a chairperson. So if there was somebody that wanted to take on the position of vice chair as well, that could support somebody as the chairperson better than what I can at the moment, I'd fully encourage that also. So,
With that, Mr. Chair, being that Anita Buhner has sold her operation, would she be interested in performing the chair's position?
I will let Anita speak on that.
Well, thanks, Mike, for that suggestion. We did sell our operation, and I'm trying to take time for aging parents and things like that too. But this is a really important issue that we find a chair. I would certainly support a chair. I could help out. I'm not sure that I'm the person to be a chairperson at this time with the commitments that I've got, but certainly not as busy as the young people in this group that are running operations, and I certainly sympathize for the position that they're in now. So I would certainly support someone in that role, but I really don't think that I'm the person to be chairing at this point. But we really need to find a chair. This is an important board, advisory board. So.
How about Trish Morney?
I knew you were going to say that. I kind of have my hands full. I'm already on ACC, and we're dealing with some pretty significant issues. And despite the fact that I'm not dealing with workers, thank goodness, I worked my entire Easter weekend as well, except for a few hours on Sunday. I'm swamped right now, so I don't think I can do. I don't think I can do more. Sorry.
No.
Wish I could help
That's
out
fair,
more,
Trish.
but I'm kind of at my breaking point too. And I've already pushed a few people off that need help as well.
Certainly understood, Trish.
Hayden, can
I ran out of
Yeah.
suggestions here. Everybody's busy.
Hayden, can I clarify? You wish to stay on as vice chair, just not as chair. Is that correct?
I'd like to see somebody else take on the vice chair position as well. If I think it can be better supported if somebody with some more time
Okay.
can help out with that too.
Okay. Sure. So I guess we'll open the floor again to nominations for chair first. Not everyone all at once now. Why don't we do vice chair first? Is there any nominations for vice chair?
I think, Mike, did you nominate Anita already?
I did. I put Anita's name forward as chair,
Okay.
but perhaps she'd be interested in vice chair. I don't know.
If push comes to shove, I can continue to support until we figure out another situation. Just going to be needing relying on the board more. There's versus that will be required.
Okay. Let's
Just so
just
we can keep
continue on
this meeting moving along, and then we can figure out something maybe in the back
on the
benches.
business. Okay. Maybe we'll just try and get a vice chair here before we do move on. Anita, did you want to think that over?
No, I will do. This is an important board to our county here. I will do whatever I can to support someone else. Yeah. So if that's what's necessary, I'll do what I can.
Okay. Is there any other nominations for vice chair? Do we need to have a vote? Are all in favor of Anita becoming vice chair?
I'll vote yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any opposed? Okay, Anita, you are henceforth vice chair for the next 8 to 10 months, however long there is left in the year. And I'll put it out again, just really quickly. Is there anyone else that has a nomination for chair?
Could you also ask Jacob if anyone wants to volunteer?
Absolutely. I think we're going to have to come to that. So would anyone like to volunteer to be the chair? Okay, so at this point, Dusty, if like you say, if you don't mind staying on until we can find a replacement, you'll be our chair or our interim chair. I'm not sure exactly how we'll word that, but you'll, if it's okay with you, you'll stay on, and we'll work together to find a solution going forward.
Yep, that's fine with me.
Feel free to
I'll make it work.
take us from there.
I feel like the Buffalo Sabres coaching staff never know who's interim and who's the actual head coach. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone's understanding with it. And believe me, I'm not here saying that I'm busier than anyone else, and I do respect that this is unprecedented, just wild. So I appreciate everyone banding together, and let's do what's best for our county. Okay, so moving on. Where is, oh boy, there's my agenda. Perfect. Okay, I believe so. If we move, give me 1 second here. Inbox, agenda. Okay, so do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interests? I will accept silence as no. Okay. Seeing none. Is Mr. Biddle, are you online?
I am. Yep.
Perfect. All right. I will remind you, even though I feel like you've heard it a million times, but you have 10 minutes to give your presentation. At that point, then the floor is open for questions from the board and back and forth. And everyone, the draft bylaw was sent out by Jacob. It was sent on what day, Jake? If everyone would want to pull it up. April meeting. Perfect. Is that in February? Jake, what day did you send out the bylaw?
Just let me go back in the archives here.
Yep. Oh, on March the 31st, Anita and Jacob were having conversations, and the draft Norfolk County Forest Bylaw was supplied there. And perfect. From there, Mr. Biddle, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, so I don't really have a formal presentation put together here. I'm hoping just to kind of have some more open dialogue after I'm finished speaking here. So I'll just kind of give a quick overview of kind of where we're at with our draft bylaw circulation, why it's out, and what we're hoping to come from this this circulation period here. So as Dusty has stated, we have circulated a draft bylaw, and there's a couple other documents that have gone along with it just to kind of help people reading the draft bylaw understand it a little bit better and see kind of what's been done in other areas. There's a comparison document as well that compares our current bylaw and the draft with Middlesex, Perth, Huron, and Oxford counties. So some of our neighbors to the west and to the north. The kind of intent of this draft bylaw and this commenting period, it was brought forward late 2019 to council. The wishes of an area farmer just wanting to see something done with the current forest conservation bylaw, having it revisited, and kind of go through this public commenting period. Staff have put forward this draft addressing some changes that we know internally needed to happen, so some administrative changes, and then just some changes that we felt we were hearing from the community. We made some changes that we thought would benefit the community and landowners in general. So I guess the largest takeaways, if you're looking at the draft and what we currently have as a forest conservation bylaw, some of the large changes, I'll say, include the size of woodland that's regulated. So currently in our forest conservation bylaw, we regulate everything right down to half an acre. So, you know, a standalone woodlot that's half an acre in size out in the middle of a field, currently, as it stands, that is regulated and through our conservation bylaw. If you wanted to clear it, there's a process to go through to apply for a permit to allow that clearing. The one change that we have made in this draft is we are changing that size limit to 2.5 acres or 1 hectare. That's a pretty substantial change, and the intent there, as we've dealt with these council exemptions, when people are applying to clear woodlands, we are finding the majority of them are kind of that smaller size woodland. They're isolated woodlands in the middle of a field, and the intent through most of our applications that we're seeing is, you know, it to improve agricultural efficiencies or even to create more workable land, it's been desirable to get rid of those isolated woodlands. And we're saying, you know, from staff's perspective, even though those woodlands have value in terms of their forest cover and the species in them, you know, maybe that's an easy, you know, give, I'll say, because there's a little give and take, an easy give. You know, maybe we don't regulate these smaller woodlands and we improve some of the management on the larger tracts. So that's one significant change you'll see. And not to be confused, that is, we are saying, you know, 1 hectare woodlands are not regulated. That does not imply that you could clear a hectare from your farm if it is part of a larger woodland. So it really is just those isolated 1 hectare woodlands or smaller that would be not regulated. If you wanted to clear, say, even 1/2 acre off of a larger woodland that's larger than 1 hectare in size, that would still be regulated. So just that sometimes gets twisted and confused. So I just want to make sure that that point is clear. Other changes that were made include changes. So if a landowner is undertaking a commercial logging operation, currently they have 2 options, I'll say, to go forward with an operation. They can mark the trees themselves or have a logger or timber buyer mark the timber, or they can hire a professional forester and do what's called good forestry practices. And through that method, there's less of a requirement, I guess, in terms of what's being left behind. So in the first option, if you're marking your woodlot yourself for a commercial logging operation, or you're bringing in a logger to do the marking, there is a requirement to have a certain amount of trees over a certain size left behind. So in simple terms, we're saying basically there has to be a certain stocking of trees left over if you're doing a commercial operation. In the draft bylaw, what we've done is we have made those conditions in terms of what's being left behind a little bit more stringent. In forestry, we talk about stocking and what's left over in terms of basal area, and that's expressed in meters squared per hectare. So essentially it's saying, you know, if you were to cut all the trees off at breast height, the surface area of those stems is what we're saying is meters squared per hectare. Our current bylaw says that you must have 16 meters squared per hectare left over after a commercial harvest. What we're saying in our draft bylaw is of that 16 meters squared, so of the trees you're leaving behind, they have to be good. They've got to be quality trees that aren't going to decline or fall out of the stand within the next 10 years. What we're seeing now is even with that requirement to have a certain amount of trees left behind after a harvest, there is no regard for what's being left behind. So you could be leaving ash trees behind that you know are going to die within 10 years. You could be leaving beech trees behind that are diseased. And, you know, in terms of the bylaw, it meets the basal requirements. It's technically passed right now. We're just hoping to change that and say, you know, if there's a requirement to leave this much behind, that you're leaving good quality trees behind that aren't going to die or decline in the next 10 years. Included in that is that we're also saying of that 16 meters squared per hectare, 3 meters squared, so a small percentage of that, does have to be trees over 50 centimeters in diameter at breast height or larger. So in simple terms, we're saying, you know, of that 16 meters squared, you have to leave a small percentage of these larger trees, and that is for the purpose of, you know, leaving quality seed trees and stand structure behind. Right now, there isn't that requirement, and we are finding successively as we go through and woodlots are repeatedly harvested, there's a lack of those larger trees being left behind in the woodlots, and that does have a huge impact for the stand structure, longevity of the stand, and forest health. Further, there have been some subtle changes also to the exemption portion of the bylaw. We have included an exemption that would effectively exempt properties that are 1 hectare or smaller in size. The intent there being residential lots, if they're typically 1 acre, but up to one hectare. Regulating tree cutting around a residential lot can be tricky. A lot of times you're dealing with hazardous trees. People get concerned if their kids are playing in the backyard. They're concerned about some of the trees. What we found in dealing with our current forest conservation bylaw is we have had calls. People in town. A woodland can span multiple properties, right? So even though the property may only be at 1 acre, you could be part of a larger woodland complex. So you go to cut a tree in your backyard and the neighbor's calling. At the end of the day, that's not something we're trying to police with the forest conservation bylaw. It's super tricky to regulate something like that when you're dealing with trees near houses and near residential uses like that, especially when you're talking about health and safety. But at the end of the day, there's probably policy or different ways if the county had an interest in regulating that and kind of protecting trees on smaller residential lots, that there could be policy or bylaws developed specifically for that. But in the context of the forest conservation bylaw, when we're looking at forests across the entire county, we're already kind of saying with this draft, these smaller 1 hectare woodlots, maybe there's less of an interest in regulating those. Maybe we focus the efforts on larger woodland tracts, better managing those larger woodland tracts, with that same flavor that maybe these residential lots, if they're already a severed created residential lot, the intent we know is residential use. The use of the property isn't for commercial forestry or anything like that. And there is a value in keeping those trees for residential use. Maybe the forest conservation bylaw doesn't need to apply in those areas. We've also added the exemption to make it more explicitly clear when it comes to maintaining the woodland and agricultural field interfaces, that the removal of trees 10 years or younger is just explicitly exempt. There is no requirement, if you're doing brushing along a headland or removing trees along the edge of a forest. If the intent is to, prevent trees from creeping out into a meadow, an agricultural field, or just creeping out in general, obviously those trees can be cleared, and the bylaw would not be applicable in those instances. I don't believe I missed anything too significant. Those are the major changes. Essentially, the draft bylaw is not a huge far stretch from what we currently operate with. Like I said, we just wanted to clear up a few things. The deregulation of woodlands 1 hectare or less, we're seeing as, that would be a benefit to the agricultural community. A lot of the exemption permits we're currently dealing with are for areas such as that. And in the supplementary document provided with the forest bylaw, there is kind of a breakdown of those exemption permits and how they're, how many of them are processed over the last 11 years and what the purposes for them are. And you'll see that, essentially when it comes to forest clearing in Norfolk, people that are applying for these permits, it can fall into 2 categories, essentially, agriculture or development. And those are the 2 big ones. Development has been relatively small, but when it does occur, it generally is for a larger area. The agricultural ones tend to be, pretty small and minor in nature, but there's more of them, so they add up and compile over years. So, you can see over the 11 years, we have approved through our current bylaw 84 acres to be cleared, and approximately 50 of that has been for agriculture, about 35 for development. Through the exemption process permit, we do have some mitigation measures in there, like we do require either the landowner replant an equivalent area of trees or make a payment in lieu of reforestation. most people opt to make the payment in lieu of reforestation. So of that 85 acres that has been cleared, the county has either had trees replanted or we have been paid in lieu of reforestation for the majority of that acreage. So we do have a reforestation reserve here at the county that we will be using to replant trees elsewhere. So that's kind of the intent of the exemption process. I'm not going to ramble on too much longer. Like I said, I did want to kind of have the open dialogue and stuff. So I know you guys have had some time to digest the draft bylaw. I don't know if you've had much time to talk amongst yourselves on it, but while you have me here today, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has on that.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Adam. Anita, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Dusty. So Adam, is it possible just to review the agricultural aspects of the bylaw, things like fence rows and things that you would see commonly addressed by the agricultural community? If we could go through that quick draft, just highlighting those that specifically impact agriculture.
Yep, absolutely there, Anita. Bear with me a minute here. So I'm assuming everyone has a copy of the draft in front of them.
Yes.
So sorry, Anita, did you just want me to go through the bylaw and kind of section by section tease out kind of the
Yeah.
sections that would have
I think so, Adam, because if we've all got it in front of us, you're the one that has the background information of where the agricultural community has the touch points with that. So if we could quickly just go through that and say, okay, this one might affect the farmers in Norfolk County and how it would impact us. And then, it'll give us a little bit more, I think, to consider.
Well, if I'm working through the bylaw just from front to back, one of the first things that comes up is that the application area. So as I mentioned, our current bylaw regulates right down to half an acre. And what we're proposing in the current bylaw is that only woodlands 1 hectare or larger would be regulated. So I'd be interested in the board's thoughts on that, if that's a positive. I know I have heard several comments since I've put this out that might not be such a positive, recognizing that a lot of those smaller woodlands do have value and they do add up. I'd just like to get the board's take on that.
And I see your hand up. Is that a question or was that in response to Adam's question?
Yeah, I would comment in response to Adam. I think that that's a good size because that's what's outlined in the provincial regulation in terms of like normal farm practice is that size, right? So I assume that's why you're mirroring.
So most definitions, well, the definition for woodlands, first of all, will come from the Forestry Act, and that's where you get that definition of so many trees per hectare equals a woodland. And it kind of gives you the number of trees per hectare, I think, is a simple measurement unit, but that is extrapolated and it can apply to smaller areas as well. The Forestry Act does not explicitly say a woodland is 1 hectare or larger. That's kind of left open for interpretation. The other spot you'll find woodlands defined comes from the 2020 provincial policy statement, or 2019, I forget the last one they put out. And it includes the definition for woodlands from the Forestry Act, but also the definition of woodlands from what's called the Ecological Land Classification System, which is kind of the provincial system for describing areas, usually natural areas, and it would define a woodland as a percent of tree cover. So certain percent tree cover quantifies a woodland. It kind of ignores the stalking and it's just looking more at tree cover. So those are kind of the two different ways you can look at defining woodland, either by tree cover or by number of trees. Forestry Act has always been the traditional, this many trees per hectare equals a woodland, and that's kind of what we've stuck with. And we have, like you said, gone with the 1 hectare. I'm not going to say that's how it is established in provincial legislation, but more and more we are seeing municipal bylaws adopt that practice, particularly where they have substantial woodland cover.
So Adam, you said that you've done some comparisons with other municipalities around the area. Are they consistent with 1 hectare?
So not in my comparators is Haldeman County. They were going through a review at the same time, as their bylaw was actually more dated than ours. And their previous bylaw had been passed under the Forestry Act. They've actually just adopted the 1 hectare. Looking at the other areas, so County of Huron is still, they're regulating right down to half an acre still. County of Perth is right down to half an acre still. Elgin is right down to half an acre. And Middlesex and Oxford are a little less, it's a little harder to tell just by reading their bylaw. If you were to just read their bylaw, I would interpret it as being 1 hectare or greater. I've spoken to the bylaw officers in both areas. They tend to regulate down to half an acre. But if you read their bylaw, it does seem like it's 1 hectare or larger.
And Adam, of the applications that you've received, say in the last 5 years, how much difference would this going from a half an acre to 2.5 acres or 1 hectare make to the agricultural community?
So if I look up, and I'm just opening a file here, so bear with me. If I look at my council exemption applications for the past, 11 years or so, the vast majority of them, I'm going to say off the top of my head, just looking at my list here, 90% of them are all for 1 hectare or less. Now, just looking at my numbers here, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a standalone woodlot that was 1 hectare or less. We do get, often applications where the clearing is for small acreage, but part of a larger woodland. So again, even in this draft, that would be regulated. So it's hard to tease out the numbers here without going through a whole GIS exercise, looking at each application individually and say, okay, this one was an isolated woodlot, this one was an isolated woodlot. But just from my own anecdotal experience, I'm going to say close to half of them probably are those isolated woodlands. So in terms of the proposed change, what that would mean is, of these 85 acres that we've approved to be cleared through our bylaw, maybe 30 acres would now not require the permit and the application to allow for that. So there would be less, I guess it'd be easier, for landowners who own and manage those small woodlands. If they so desired to clear them, there would be less requirement on the county's part as far as applying for a permit to allow that.
So it doesn't mean more acres would be cleared. It just means the process would be simpler.
Right. They're like I said, of that 85 acres, again, if I had to throw if I had to put a number on it, I'm going to say about 30% of that maybe would now not require a permit. Doesn't necessarily mean those people are just going to up and clear those woodlands. Over the course of 11 years, I'm saying maybe we've had 30 acres where they were just those isolated woodlands. And I'm making a note of that now, and I will kind of get those harder numbers to speak to see how much, of that 85 acres, how much of that was actually isolated, less than a hectare woodland. Because we are anticipating that, it is going to open up those smaller woodlands for clearing perhaps, but that opportunity is there now to apply for a permit and do that. And we don't have a whole lot of people lining up to do that. We deal with maybe 5 to 6 exemption permits a year, and like I said, they're not all those isolated woodlands. They are, you know, oftentimes clearing portion of a larger woodland. So that those clearings aren't going to change. There's still going to be the requirement to apply for a permit. There's just going to be a small percentage of them that, you know, maybe there won't be a permit now.
Okay. Any other specific points, Adam, that Anita was asking for?
Oh, I'll keep working through the bylaw here. So that was in the application. So if you go through the exemptions, there are a number of exemptions right at the start of the exemption section that are mandated through the Municipal Act. So I'm going to skip over most of those. Those are a lot of like the quarry ones, the energy transmitter through the Electricity Act. The municipalities are exempt, Surveying Act. So a lot of things are exempt through provincial legislation already. So the exemption section, I always say, is broken into kind of 2 different components. There's the mandatory exemptions, and then there's what we call the optional exemptions. So the optional exemptions are basically anything developed by the municipality included in the bylaw to exempt a specific activity that's not intended to be regulated. We have always historically included things like own use. You know, if someone wants to harvest firewood, they heat with firewood, and they've got a use for material from their woodlot, we certainly don't want to necessarily restrict them from harvesting that material, provided, you know, it's own use. We've basically been forced to define it as a volume, because how else do you really define own use? And realistically, there's only a certain volume of wood that any one person is going to use. And more, you know, the majority of that, it does relate almost explicitly to firewood. So we do include that exemption still for, you know, a landowner who wants to harvest trees for their own use. We've included the volume of 24 cubic meters as the threshold. And 24 cubic meters translated into cords, I think works out to be about 7 full cords or 21 face cords, which is typically, if you were to heat your home just with firewood, that would probably be about the amount of wood you would go through. And I think more and more there's fewer people doing that. We have expanded upon that own use exemption and included the requirement that it's done in accordance with good forestry practices. The stump is not removed. The basal area is maintained, so that basal area that applies to commercial harvest would now be included in the landowner's own use harvesting. And the harvesting of trees does not result in clearing, essentially. So of those expanded in the own use exemption, the requirement to leave a stump is new, and I wouldn't mind getting some comments on that. And the reason we've included that is because almost all instances, like the only reason for removing a stump is in relation to clearing. There really isn't much of a reason to remove a stump aside from that. So we figured that would be reasonable to have in there. And then also just the basal area requirement. That wasn't included in the own use exemption before. We have included it just to kind of keep everyone on a level playing field. If you're doing commercial harvest, if you're harvesting in general, like we just want to see that there's that certain stocking of trees left behind. So I don't know if there's any comments on the stump. I know the stump thing, I have heard from a few people they had issues with that, but I don't know specifically what the issue was. So I don't know if anyone on the board has any thoughts on those items.
So for me, just so I can understand the motivation, I know you alluded to it lightly there, is that the only reason why you'd remove a stump is that if you're clearing, but just for cosmetics, if I'm the person that's cutting wood in my forest for heating a house, say, I must keep it higher than 10 centimeters off the ground. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, because the only time that you would want to bring it all the way down from your perspective is that when somebody is taking it for like taking out all of the trees.
Typically, yes.
So if you do this as a deterrent, it's just so I can understand the motivations.
Yeah, it's just a better way of it makes enforcement a little bit easier. We'll put it that way. If you're removing a stump, that's something that's easy to enforce.
Okay. And this is a situation you run into often?
The only instance we run into stumps being removed from the ground, to be honest with you, is just in clearing. And that's why we've included it, because I have yet really to come across an instance where people are harvesting trees and ripping out stumps. It's a lot of work for no gain, really, right? So the only instance we see stumps ripped out is typically if the forest is being cleared.
Okay.
Adam, I think that ensures accountability and for the county if they need to enforce anything, and I think it's certainly reasonable.
Thank you, Anita. And then I guess the only other thing in there too is that wasn't included in the previous exemption for own use was the stocking requirement. So we added the stocking requirement into this one again, just to put everything on the level playing field. Obviously, whenever you put an exemption into a bylaw, it does become opportunity, obviously, for some people who want to take advantage of the bylaw or use an exemption as an excuse for doing something else. So the own use one is often that one that's cited. You know, if we're dealing with an infraction or enforcement issue, a lot of people will use the own use card. You know, we're doing this for own use, even though all the materials being cut, piled, and burned on site. That's not something that we necessarily constitute own use. But what we wanted to do is if people are using the own use card, that, you know what, if it's own use, that's fine. We don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of, what you're using it for, this and that. But as long as the woodlot is being maintained to the same standard as, any other commercial operation, being that you're maintaining a certain stocking of trees, then that's fine. As long as that stocking is there, then, we can worry less about own use. And the stocking's being maintained the same on an own use harvest as it is for a commercial harvest, as it is for anyone else. And then the other exemption included in there that is new to this draft bylaw would be the exemption for harvesting trees or injuring destruction of trees that are 15 years or less growing along the edge of a woodland. So that again is to kind of allow landowners to address that encroachment, which inevitably occurs all the time along the woodland edge. The trees always want to naturally succeed out into the open areas. So this, we put a 15-year age limit on it and said basically anything along the edge of that woodland for 15 years or less can be cleared. That one was obviously included specifically to the benefit of the agricultural community. I'd be interested on the board's opinion on that, if 15 years is reasonable or if there's something we're overlooking on that one.
There we go. I want to defer this to, sorry, Ms. Mayor.
If I can, I think my suggestion, Adam, is more for the board I think it was to kind of receive the presentation. And then I think they need to digest it and then be able to provide some comments back, because one individual making comments on behalf of the board isn't really necessarily reflective of the board's view. Like, I think they need to put some thought into those different provisions.
Yeah, definitely. What I want to do now is just addressing Anita's question there, just kind of work through the bylaw front to back. We don't have to have, in-depth discussion right now, but just, point out the specific provisions that may impact agriculture. And whether you guys have questions now, I can answer them. But certainly it's not expected that we're going to have, solve all the problems right now, here and now. obviously it's going to be a benefit to have discussion afterwards.
What, Adam, if I may, what is the timing, and Councillor Columbus and Ms. Chop, what's the timing of this bylaw for going to next step, being in this public position? And second question is this bylaw able to be circulated outside of the board? Draft, sorry, is this draft?
So the commenting period currently is set to close on April 30th. The draft is available to the entire public right now, so certainly it can be circulated outside this group. My intent anyway was to have this commenting period close and then prepare a report and presentation for council that would kind of go over the draft bylaw and include all the comments that we've received to date. And then it would be, you know, council to give direction as far as next steps. But I think it'd be important to at least get all the comments and the draft together, presented to council so that there's all the information on the table to have some discussion and inform next steps.
Thank you for that, Anita and Trish.
So Adam, I just had two further questions with regard to the proposed bylaw and agriculture. So for own use, supplementing greenhouse heating, acceptable or limited to those the 24 cubic meters?
I think for now, you know, pending other comments, I'd be leaning towards keeping it at the 24 cubic meters. I don't know how much of the greenhouse heating is utilizing material from the woodland. I know that's a portion of it, but I know a lot of those greenhouses are also supplementing with waste wood, right? So I don't know if there are specific examples of operations using a substantial amount of firewood from the forest. I'd be interested to know that. But just I know that a lot of the barns and operations I'm familiar with use a lot of scrap wood, even from the tree removal contractors from the roadside stuff. Like they're utilizing a lot of material that way. I don't know how much of a demand on the actual woodlots those operations have right now. And certainly,
I don't know, it's something that I just think, you know, we need to think about or maybe look into. The other question I had, the definition of the fence row, is this new or has that been in existence all along? Because we certainly see a number of fence rows removed every year. Our practices are hopefully better, that removing those fence rows is okay for our Norfolk soils. But just wondering, is that the same or has that changed?
So in the current bylaw, fence rows are not regulated. Like we do not regulate the removal of fence rows today. The way it's worded in our current bylaw is a little confusing and left quite a bit to be desired. So in this draft, we just wanted to kind of clean that up in terms of, you know, here and in our current bylaw, what it is it kind of falls within the definition of woodlands. And we have a set width a woodland needs to be considered a woodland. And it just gets a little convoluted. So what we've done in this one is that we've just explicitly said, you know, fence rows are not intended to be regulated. And then we've included the definition of fence row for further clarification, what we're considering a fence row. So that I know fence rows, every time the bylaw comes up for review, it tends to be a little contentious because certainly, obviously with our sandy soils here, fence rows and windbreaks do serve a very important purpose. I think we're looking at, you know, with respect to the forest conservation bylaw and the intent of the bylaw being to regulate woodlands and encouraging proper stewardship of forests, the fence rows are kind of outside of that scope. So we were intending to keep those in that way.
Thank you, Adam.
I was just going to ask Adam, do you have specific questions that you want the board to give you feedback on? So you mentioned about the 1 hectare and you mentioned about the 15 years or less trees that are creeping into fields. Are there other items that you would like to hear the board's comments on? Nothing
specific, and the only reason why I point out some of those is just because they are new to the draft. And I guess they're just ones that I'm curious about feedback in general, like not specific to the ag board, but just in general. So that's kind of why I was dwelling on those ones a little bit. But certainly the 1 hectare one, like obviously that has some of the biggest impact as far as changes go to the bylaw, just the regulation of the 1 hectare or deregulation of 1 hectare or smaller woodlands. Like that's probably the largest impact, or the change that's going to have the largest impact. So that's just kind of why I dwelled on that one a little bit. The rest of them, I mean, everyone's going to interpret their own ways, so I don't want to necessarily feed into that or steer anyone or any group one way or the other. Like I said, I'll leave myself open. Like if you guys review this amongst yourselves and have comments that come up, I'm open for communication, like right up to that April 30th deadline. So if there's information I can give you guys that are going to help you with your review, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you.
Anne?
Yeah, I have a couple comments and a question for Adam. So I'll start with my question. Can you walk me through the enforcement part? Like, let's say I'm cutting trees as a farmer and a neighbor calls me in to the bylaw officer and says, hey, she's cutting trees. Like, I'm just trying to read through these steps of enforcement. Like, at what point do you notify the farmer that you're coming on the land?
So if we were to receive a call from anyone, concerned about tree cutting, typically, our first response is to show up on site and do a site inspection. We've typically got someone in the field all the time, so it's a call out to our officer in the field, and they would show up and just do a quick site inspection, and they are there to determine if an infraction of the bylaw is occurring or has occurred. So they've got to establish a few things, first of all, and they're going to do that the way any other bylaw officer or, police officer would do. They're going to show up and they're going to ask questions, right? So if someone's on site, they're going to ask who they are, ask them to identify themselves, who's the landowner, and basically what is the work you're doing. If it's very plainly, cutting firewood, cleaning up firewood tops, doing this or that, like our bylaw officer can make those calls pretty quick in the field. If it's something that's obviously, clearing or, they're dragging out a substantial amount of logs and it's a commercial operation, there's no permit, likely what's going to happen is there's going to be a stop work order put on the property just to cease any activity that's in contravention of the bylaw. And that's where we start talking to the landowner, figuring out all that stuff. But the first thing is usually to show up on site to do an inspection to figure out what's going on. Even if there wasn't an infraction, the officer is going to follow up with that landowner after his site visit. But oftentimes, to find the landowner's contact information, contact them, all that within the span of a few hours isn't necessarily doable. So usually it's to show up on site first.
Yeah, I don't know if there's other comments from here, but I struggle with that as a landowner, that you just come on property without calling or notifying, right?
If it's something that we can
just because a neighbor phones you in.
If it's something we can plainly see from the road, I should elaborate. Like the site inspection, they're not going to just tour around the farm looking for someone cutting trees. But if it's something that can be plainly seen from the road, someone back there cutting trees that we've had a call about, and I'll tell you, like 90% of those calls, like I've met a lot of nice people doing that, because if there's nothing illegal going on, nothing against the bylaw, it really is a simple, friendly conversation and you're on your way. And it's opportunity, to educate that person that there is a forest bylaw, and there's a lot of positive things that come out of that. Really, it only turns negative if there is obviously something going on in terms of clearing or something against the bylaw.
Yeah, I guess just me as a property owner and someone that has a number of woodlots that are nowhere close to where I live, like I would just want to be notified if someone was coming on my property to do an inspection, right? Because I've heard of instances where the tree bylaw officer shows up and will inspect and write a report, and the landowner doesn't even know that he's been there.
Well, I'm gonna say like we're keeping the landowner informed as much as we can. Obviously, if we get a complaint, we have to respond to that complaint. We don't have everyone's phone number on us, so a lot of times it's showing up to the property, speaking with who's there, and following up with the landowner afterwards. That's just the best we can do to.
But is this not an opportunity to improve the process, right? Like under section 10 for enforcement? Like one of my comments when I'm submitting in will be definitely that the landowner needs to be notified.
Mm-hmm. So this enforcement section, like basically that's almost verbatim from the Municipal Act. Basically, an officer does have the authority to enter on your property if they have reason to believe that there is an infraction occurring or could be occurring. And that's just the authority granted to essentially almost all bylaw officers and peace officers. They just have that right. If we didn't have that right, then it'd be pretty tough to enforce a bylaw. Certainly there's, processes like we can have best practices, and we do reach out to landowners. Like we don't go tromp around people's properties just because we can. It's usually to follow up on a specific complaint, or we're accessing a property where there's been a permit issued. And if we have not contacted the landowner in respect to a call, a bylaw complaint, we will be. Like we follow up as best we can.
Yeah, okay. My only other comment too, and I'll probably be submitting that too, is I would like to see agriculture mentioned in here under exemptions. Like if you look at a lot of the other bylaws from other counties, like exemption, like agriculture specifically mentioned. Because if we don't specifically mention agriculture, it can be left up to a lot of interpretations as to what is normal farm practice. That's my only.
So the normal farm practices, I mean, we could put it in there. We could say, normal farm practices is exempt. And I think I do have a comment to that respect already. There's a lot of confusion still around normal farm practices, and us including normal farm practices in the bylaw doesn't necessarily clear that confusion. Normal farm practices essentially is exempt already through the Farming, Food and Production and Protection Act. It is listed. It basically states in that act that municipal bylaw cannot interfere with an agricultural operation if they're carrying out normal farm practices. Normal farm practices, there's not a list of normal farm practices. As I'm sure everyone on this board knows, there is no list. Essentially, it kind of comes down to if there is a discrepancy or a disagreement between the landowner and the municipality with respect to a bylaw, it goes to the Normal Farm Practices Board for a decision. It's not a very cut and dry process, and there's no very nice, neat, clean list of what is a normal farm practice. So the normal farm practice thing, I don't think it's something we're going to be able to address with the Forest Conservation Bylaw, but certainly, having normal farm practices listed in the exemption, if you think it would be a benefit, then that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, no, that's, it would be exhausting to list what is normal farm practice, but maybe just a paragraph saying, normal farm practice is exempt under, and then quote the provincial act.
And what you see, like I know Halton region has adopted a little bit of an internal process, or they've outlined a little bit of a process whereby I don't know if they have an ag advisory board or if they have a board or if it's council. I'd have to look into their process a little further, but they basically have developed an internal process where a landowner can apply to the bylaw officer to say, this is the work I want to do, and is it normal farm practices? And they have a way to review that. That's something to be considered. I mean, again, that's getting outside of the scope of the bylaw itself, but it is a process or something that could be looked at as far as Norfolk County addressing normal farm practices independent from the board.
Okay. And any more questions? Those are great.
No, that was it. Other comment just towards own use that Anita had mentioned. Like I have several growers that heat chicken barns using wood, so they definitely wouldn't fit in to the amount that you have listed for own use, but they
It
are
would be too low.
Pardon? Yes, I don't know if there's an opportunity to for own use if you're heating greenhouse or livestock.
And I guess the other thing to be considered on that point is if they are heating the greenhouse with a substantial amount of wood, like at the end of the day, maybe it probably should be regulated. Like if you're looking at anything over 24 cubic meters, you're essentially, it could be looked at very equivalently to commercial operation, right? Like that's just, if you're extracting a substantial amount of wood from a wood lot, you know, that's the sort of thing that the bylaw is intended to regulate. So even though it could be viewed as own use in terms of they're using it on their own property to heat a barn, it is an industrial or commercial use, and it's fairly large in terms of its impact or wood use. So maybe that's something that would still be. And again, like a lot of those operations, they're sourcing wood from so many different sources. It's not like all that wood's coming from one wood lot. You know, we would regulate commercial firewood operators as well, which if they're sourcing firewood, it could be coming from a commercial firewood guy. Those operations are regulated because they're harvesting more than 24 cubic meters of wood out of a wood lot, right? So.
Okay. All right. So we'll put this in. We'll work on it collectively, whether we send in individually or we get the list of questions together over the next couple weeks and get them sent off to you. Probably the sooner the better, so that they're in before the comment period. We're respecting that. And does the Woodlot Association, Woodlot Owners Association, have they received this as well? Like, are they commenting on this? Do we know, Adam?
Yeah, so the woodlot owners have been reviewing this, and what they've done amongst their board is they've kind of struck up a subcommittee. So I think there's about 3 or 4 dedicated board members looking at it for the board. So it's not a drain on everyone on the board. They've kind of struck up a subcommittee, so that might be something to consider too if you guys are stretched thin.
Yeah. Or we can maybe align up. Okay. Okay. So then, yes, that'll be a big point to collect information from the board, from our board, and see if there's any parallels to understand what the woodlot owners and their subcommittee is doing, and how does a woodlot owner association parallel with agriculture. Okay. I'm just writing that down. Okay. Any other questions from the board for Mr. Biddle? Seeing none. So then that's going to be our task for this week. Realistically, let's call it by Friday the 16th. If you can please circulate all of your questions and asks by then to myself. I'll put all the questions together and get them sent off to Mr. Biddle. Deal? Perfect. Okay.
All right.
Good.
Thank you for your time,
Adam, do you have any questions for us?
No, I don't think so. Just thank you for your time today and the time you're going to be putting into reviewing this bylaw. And yeah, just it's a good opportunity, I think, to, you know, these bylaws are only opened up every so often, so I think it's a good opportunity to kind of bring it up to today's time and the needs of our current community. And look forward to working with you guys on that.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Biddle. Okay. All right. Can I get any more discussion on that while Mr. Biddle's logged off? And is Mr. Penner, is he on that subcommittee for the woodlot owners?
I don't know.
I'll find. Does anyone know any? Does anyone know anyone at the Woodlot Owner Association? Like, I don't even know. Like, are they? Like, they're not an advisory board, so they're outside of the county. I'm assuming. But does anyone have any contacts for that association?
Dusty, I do. Steve and I are members of the Norfolk Woodlot Owners. There are many members locally, but they have a website, and I could certainly contact someone there if you want us to connect with them.
Yeah, thank you. Want to find out who's on this subcommittee that's focusing on this, please, and see once we have our questions and queries, and find out what they're going on. How do we, how are they facing agriculture? Because that's a really good point, Ann. The 15-year thing is I'm trying to understand, where's that timestamp? What about new ownership, or purchasing of new farms and things like that? So yeah, Anita, if you can please find out who's on that subcommittee, we can try and parallel with them.
Sure, I'll get that to you as soon as I can.
Thank you kindly. Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to the approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Can I get a motion of support for the minutes?
Good for that, Dusty.
All right, thank you, Hayden. I don't need a seconder for that. Any questions that come up from the minutes? Just giving them a quick look. No. Okay, good. Okay. Moving on to communications. So the carbon tax letter is gaining some great momentum. If I could, Crystal, did you want to speak on it? And how about how did Plymouth? What's the county that just another county jurisdiction that is gaining its support or offering its support in the letter, the carbon tax letter? If you could speak on it.
I'm sorry, Dusty, I don't have it in front of me. There's been a few that have sent in. We sent them on to the clerks to be included as part of the information memo. But there's been several municipalities, I think, now that have sent in their support. I can't list them off the top of my head now.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
No, that's fine.
Mr. Chair, if I could, yeah, there was actually more. There have been more that have trickled in since the agenda was put together. This was just merely a kind of a sample because they've, as you can imagine, they've kind of trickled in since that point. But yeah, there actually were, I believe, like 3 or 4 more as well. So a number of different municipalities have kind of jumped on board and offered their support.
That's outstanding. That's great work by everyone here. Thank you, and thank you to council for endorsing and setting this up. So My FM has also caught wind of the garnering of support from other municipalities across the province, and they have asked for some comments from myself. So I've got a call tomorrow with that, just kind of giving an update as to the motivation behind the original letter, and as well, kind of how the steamrolling. So Jacob, I might reach out to you afterwards just so I can have a complete list of all of the current communities that offer their support, just so we can give them the credit and the thanks.
Sure. Yeah, there is actually going to be all of the ones up until this point will be listed in the or are listed in the agenda package for tomorrow's meeting as well. So I can probably just send that over.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Dooney?
Yeah, so just a point of note there. So that letter was put together by Anne and then circulated around to everybody. It doesn't seem like a lot just to put a letter together, but it was a well-written letter, and I think just hey, when people take on those tasks and put something like that together, I think we just need to say thanks very much for doing it too. So, yeah, it's great when people can jump on board and especially when you get to see cause and effect too. So.
Yes. So thank you, Anne. Mm-hmm. That's a good point, Hayden. Okay, so I mean, realistically, Anne, would you want to go on the radio tomorrow and speak on it?
No, you're way better spoken than me, Dusty.
No. I just have a bigger manure spreader. That's all. And you're so if between now and tomorrow morning, if you're willing, if you let me know.
No,
if not,
you're a lot smoother than me. So just you can put it so politely.
I appreciate that. Well, good. Okay. Well, yes, and again, thanks. This is great. This is great. As a total aside, I wonder as well, should we be giving providing this letter if they're not well aware to both the Conservative and the federal runners for Norfolk County, Alden Norfolk, just to make them privy of this. I can, if they're not aware already, I can.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, there might be an impending election coming up, and we'll see what they have to say about this. That's perfect. Great. Any other comments on the letter and the support behind it? Okay. Moving on to item 6B, the tracking table. Okay, where did this go? Come on down. Okay, so we're moving with the first item. So Jacob, the reason why that there's there's 4 items on the tracking table is because there was a cleanup done between last meeting and this meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or are we missing a page?
Yes, and it's just tradition to put this on every agenda just so people can look and just understand where we are.
No, that's fine. Because the last meeting, remember, we had like 13 items,
but
and now we're down to 4.
Clean some up because there was a number that were either outdated or completed. So we're on the right track, it looks like.
We can't keep giving ourselves the same awards for the same thing we've done. So that's great. I appreciate that. So on-farm septic, in the February 2021 meeting, meeting this year, CAO Jason Burgess is going to chat with Councillor Columbus to create a communication strategy going forward, and what actions should we take next. Now, if I could, Councillor, if you could speak on this communication strategy, or
yes, thank you.
Did Labor take over?
And Mr. Chair, I did communicate with Mr. Burgess, and this was a couple weeks after our last AAB meeting, and he was surprised it was still on here. But I made a mention that in 2019 he did make this commitment to the board, and he's got a lot of other things on his plate, he mentioned, and hopefully he can get Fritz Ensland back on track to address this subject. It is a provincial legislation issue, and it's not that easy to change or fix.
Yeah, for sure. Amongst the pandemic, I can see it. But okay, so our next point is we'll await further from Burgess.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other points of comment on that later? Okay. Item 2 is the importing of soil to Norfolk County, and that was basically we had the conversation addressed about the Haldeman's bylaw, and Jake will circulate info to the relevant staff. Jacob, just following that up.
Yes, sir. All complete.
So now what the next step would be for staff to take this recommendation into bylaw. Does that go through council, or what do we need to do to get that into Norfolk County?
I believe it would go to council, but maybe Councillor Columbus would likely have a better handle on the process than I would.
Actually, Jacob, I don't know where which department this would go to exactly. I would think it's probably the bylaw department.
Likely. I can investigate.
Okay. Just so we can get that closed off, and thank you kindly. Any other comments on this? We spoke about it heavily in the February meeting, but is there any other comments? Okay. Lot relocation. So there has been attempts to get a hold of Toby in the office regarding this. Mr. Ryder, if I could put you on the spot, I do know that you have a relationship where you know Bobby at the office. Would you be willing to reach out to see where, if we can get a letter of support or Toby's stance on lot relocation?
Yep, I've sent a text out already to see if I could set up a call with Bobby Ann to discuss further on this topic.
Okay, thank you kindly, sir. That's great.
I will.
So,
I can send an email out with response once I talk to Bobby Ann.
Thank you kindly. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions on this item? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. For moving this forward and for having that. It's great. Council presentation. So Hayden and I to look to present to council a 1-year update on the challenges. I feel like we should just keep a live stream at the farm for the presentation. We'll look to now that there's vaccination clinics happening, which were a thing of almost fantasy back on the 21st of February, and that we have entered the second phase of or stage, I should say, of vaccines, and also the understanding of how farm workers that are working with people in high congregate settings are working, and how that works with their vaccinations, how they're later in this phase and whatnot. I think it'll be a good update. Trish?
Microphone. Turn your mic on.
Trish, you're still muted.
Sorry.
Yep.
All I was asking is, what is the policy on the farm workers? Because obviously they're a high priority to keep safe by our chief medical officer, which you would think then the vaccines will be available to those that choose to take them. Is there any formal position as to whether or not they can be signed up right now? I'm just hearing about age groups. So I wasn't sure whether the farmers were hearing anything directly.
Yeah, so there was actually, Crystal, if you want to speak on this.
Sorry, I had something else going on here. I missed the first part of that, Trish, in terms of the migrant.
No, just about what the rollout of the vaccines are for the migrant workers.
As far as I'm aware, unless you guys know something different, which is entirely possible, there was the approval for the pilot project, but there's no registration as of yet that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything we can do to encourage that?
I think Shanker has advocated, one of the things he has done is obviously advocated pretty fiercely for that position. From a council board of health perspective, you have to understand, there's another balance that's happening here as people, I can't tell you the number of emails I've got and stuff, you know, are migrant workers getting vaccinated right now before I'm getting vaccinated as a Canadian, you know, that's a taxpayer here and so on. You know, and I try to explain, listen, like, you know, when you look at the number of resources that public health has used, which is your tax dollars, and trying to manage these outbreaks, like the biggest areas of concerns really that we've seen have been the long-term care facilities, and of course, you know, the large outbreaks in the bunkhouses. And so that is the balance that public health has to take of, you know, how they look at prioritizing who's getting vaccines, and so defending that position. But I'm sure that's probably what, you know, the feds are feeling as well with it. You know, I don't know that there's anything more than what, you know, again, Shanker has advocated very strongly, perhaps maybe even a little too strongly, when he claimed the federal government was racist in the Toronto Star. You know, I don't know, Trish. I don't think there's anything else you can do. Again, he's on those task force. He's in direct communication with them, and he's clearly come out, you know, extremely in support of vaccinating the workers. You know, it largely due again to the public health resources that are required in managing those outbreaks.
Okay, so it falls completely on the federal government. They're making the rules as to who's being vaccinated when.
Well, it's the province and the feds. So provincially, the provincial government decides who, in terms of these phases and essential workers and so on and so forth. My understanding, though, from the pilot project, that was something that was coming at the federal level. You know, could you advocate more with Toby's office and so on? Certainly. Is that going to do much? Probably not. You know, but that's not a decision that we can make locally. That is a higher power than us as to who gets the vaccines and when.
Okay. So maybe all we can do is make sure that the farmers are informed, so that they can be on it and have discussions with their workers so that they're educated on what the options are when they are called.
When they are, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so that's a good point. I see Mark and Hayden.
So I will tell you guys that I've got about 30 migrant workers in at this point, and they've all been offered the vaccine, which is amazing. It's a really awesome step that we've made as a county to try and get these guys vaccinated. The problem that we are experiencing on farm, and I'm not sure if anyone here is also experiencing this issue, we're having a lot of vaccine hesitancy within the group. Out of the 30 guys, only 10 actually committed to go get vaccinated. So I'm not entirely sure what we can do as an industry, but I know that on farm we are going to be strongly encouraging the vaccine. Obviously, there will be no forcing or anything like that. We're not in a position to tell people what they can put in their bodies. But this is a big issue for us on farm, and just want to raise the issue, and maybe there's a solution that we can think of here.
So Mark, that's a really good point. And with our arrivals that were part of the trial clinic, I had the same difficult conversations with the men. And the other part is that I don't want to be liable in the event of something going wrong. And I know it's a 1 in a million or whatever odd chances, but also trying to speak calmly, confidently with the information. So I did reach out to the health unit, requesting that we need some documentation to add into our COVID binders that are already in all of the bunkhouses. And they do have there's 3 different documents 2 single pagers and then 1 back-to-back that are available in Spanish that got sent out to us. And then after the initial conversation, I then had these pamphlets that I then gave to each of the men. I read with the guys and went over the items, and that got that raised the amount of people that actually got the vaccine to about 95%. There was hesitancy before, but that helped with that conversation. So I can in the AAB, the email thread, I can send those documents out so that the health unit doesn't get bombarded by 13 different emails. And that's what I use, and that's what helped with the communication, from at least in my standpoint.
That would be amazing. Would really appreciate that, Dusty.
Yep, sure. Aiden?
Yeah, it was the same point that Mark just brought up, and I think it's a really valid one. So I have a pretty good rapport with my guys, and they were part of the trial vaccine clinic as well. And basically going to them and having the conversation and saying, hey, this vaccine's available here. They were speechless. They didn't respond, first of all. And I said, hey, how about you just have some time to digest, and here's a little bit of information in regards to what the vaccine offers. And yeah, they eventually came around to it, but there was a lot of hesitation there. One suggestion that I made to Sarah is as a farm manager, and I think this one gets difficult for them to do within the constraints of the how the government's releasing the vaccines. But hey, if I'm asking my guys to go along, it's a difficult one to have that conversation and say, hey, I would suggest that you get the vaccine, but I'm not going to get it yet. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge, because if I was standing there alongside them and I said, I'm going along with you guys, anyone that wants to get the vaccine, we're going on this date and time, then I think it would create less angst amongst the workers.
Absolutely. And what we've tried to do is to attempt to say, okay, you guys, you need to get vaccinated. If you're hesitant, I will be first in line. I will get jabbed first. The problem is that there's no vaccines allotted to me. It's all to migrant workers at this point. So we've attempted to, be that example as, as a farm owner here, jab that thing in me. I trust it. But at this point, we're getting the no from the Board of Health, and maybe there's something that can be done there.
Okay. Yep. Any other questions on the presentation, but also specifically this good point, Trish?
I would echo those comments. I think there's generally a lot of misinformation on the vaccines out there, and it's slow for everyone hearing about them. And so I can understand the concern of the migrant workers coming out. So, I mean, if there's any sort of educational resources where they can hear that and make an educated decision, rather than just whatever's coming across their social media field, because there's like everything from equal spectrums out there, right? And I would agree. I think the example, if the farmer can set the example that they're not scared of it, that's going to go a long way. And I mean, we've already seen healthcare workers do that, which I'm sure has brought some comfort to other people in Ontario before they're going to do it as well. So maybe those resources see it. I mean, if I know a lot of us have some emails. If we can kind of send that out to everybody we can reach, then everyone can do with them what they wish. But it'll help that the farm workers have some time to digest that and make an educated decision.
Yeah. The health unit is pulling from. It's actually the documents are all on the OFUGA website, so we'll send through the link, and then on that link there's in different languages for Spanish, Thai, and French and English. So I'll send that. It's on the OFUGA website, so I'll send that through. Jason, did you have your hand up?
And I did. I took it down once Trish was speaking. It was just to pretty much address what she was saying on the documents the Ontario Fruit and Veg Growers sent out this morning. There's a bunch of facts and myth sheets. The more of those, the better. Also, to say what Hayden was saying, my guys were a lot less hesitant once we thought we were going to get him, and then once we said we were not allowed to get him. I had that challenge of discussing it with them why I'm not getting it and why they're getting it. So there's some changes I could see that would correct a lot of these issues right there. But also I think documentation for them to read, even in quarantine right now, they could be reading and they could be figuring out ups and down. I mean, all 6 guys that I put through did go get it. At the end of the day, if you're going to get it with them, it does make it a lot easier. I can see that right now. So that's all my comments are.
Okay. Mayor Chop?
Yeah, Dusty, I'm going to have to get going to another call. So if you need me for anything else, now's your opportunity. I'm thinking tomorrow for the Board of Health meeting. Are you guys, what Jason and I were talking about was you guys coming to the meeting and posing some real life scenarios to Shanker. So I don't know if somebody's available to attend the Board of Health meeting tomorrow. Especially in regards to the transportation and so on. So then the board can ask some further questions of them. But again, I think it would be, especially I know you had a couple situations, Dusty, where you proposed some options to him that were turned down. And so, again, I think posing the real world scenarios and getting him on the record publicly with that would be beneficial.
I can make myself available. Absolutely.
Perfect. I guess the only other thing, I know you guys are anxious to hear more about the meeting. At the end of the day, I know everyone wants this simple solution. We're speaking here as the Ag Advisory Board. I don't expect to see this on social media of seeing Shanker, terminated and gone. The province has very clearly indicated to us that they will not allow us to operate without a medical officer of health. We've known that all along. It's understandable in a pandemic that they're not going to do that. So the biggest thing is we need to find someone, and I'm sure you can appreciate that it's not exactly a job that people want to take on right now. So we have reached out to a number of retired local physicians. Everybody so far has turned it down. There is one that is expressing some possible interest. We've gone further now. We've posted the ad publicly. So finding somebody is the critical point, to even think about making any kind of changes there. As Shanker is leaving the end of May. There is going to be some, I don't really know what else to tell you other than we need to find somebody else. And at the end of the day, the province also, they're not going to remove an MOH, unless they see that, a medical officer of health has placed the public in danger. Do I have concerns as chair of the board and the Board of Health that I think some of these orders, particularly with regards to the transportation one, when I had asked him if he would support 10 community members, driving the 10 guys, I do believe that increases the risk to our community. Or 10 taxi drivers, as an example, with 10 guys, that effectively increases the risk to the migrant workers. So I don't believe in the logic that's behind these latest directives. Is it enough for the province to say he's putting the public in harm's way? I don't know. But again, we've sought some legal advice from BLG, and we're going to be getting that back hopefully today. So the board will be able to discuss that. Part of it will be in closed session, and we'll release whatever we can publicly at that time. One of the biggest things for us is, again, since none of these directives are made in consultation with the board, what what authority do we have to act? Preliminarily, I would say, just from my own reading, this isn't from legal, we do have the opportunity for a judicial review. It would be extremely unorthodox, I think, for a Board of Health to ask for a judicial review of some of the directives. I think that's something we're probably all willing to do. The unfortunate part of it is that it takes time. As you saw with Brett's appeal, that's a long process. That's not going to solve the matter right now. The people that actually have more authority under the act, are the people that are affected by the order. So, that still remains an option for anyone that's affected to launch an appeal on their own. But again, it obviously is a process. It takes time, and you saw the result the last time. So we're doing what we can. I understand it's not fast enough for everyone, but we do live in a country governed by the rule of law, and unfortunately, that is the way the Health Protection and Promotion Act in Ontario is structured. So if you have any questions for me, I guess now's the time. Otherwise, I'm going to just jump off here. I got to take another call.
Trish, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I don't particularly have a question, Crystal, and I appreciate your position. I guess I'd just like to stress that what I've heard from some farm operations, because this is so onerous and the amount of people they need to get here, that they've been forced to hire companies out of Toronto, Peel region, and all these areas where they're having outbreaks and all the variants to bring their workers one by one. So it's not only putting those workers at risk, it's putting our whole community at risk, because I'm sure those people are stopping on their way at a store or whatever. And we've already had enough devastation.
Thanks, Trish. And if that's something if there was a way that we could overrule this, we would do it, but unfortunately that's not the way the legislation is structured. But I think that is a really great point that you definitely need to raise tomorrow at the Board of Health meeting, and have Shanker respond directly to that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Ryder?
Yeah, I was one of those operations that had to get 15 taxis. Individual drivers brought my guys down to Brantford. The bus load of another operation in Brant pulled up behind my 15 guys. Obviously looked a lot safer with one driver and all the guys in a bus rather than one by one with 15 random people. That's my first discussion, but it's a question for Crystal, I guess, Mayor Chop. What happens when he is gone May 21st and we are left without a medical officer health? What does that look like?
Well, that is, I could say, that is one of the questions, we asked the province. Ultimately, I think that they're going to have to be in a position that they're going to have to step in and provide somebody at that point in time until we can fill the position on our own.
So if
it will either be that, or we'll have some, we're obviously in consultation with some of the other health districts, and whether they'll be able to provide somebody on loan for a certain amount of time and so on. But the province is aware of his departure, and ultimately I think it's going to kind of fall to them to have to step in the same way, when we talked about potentially resigning as the board, would that be left to the province then to step in and do that? Yes. Some people can criticize and say, well, how could you possibly think about resigning, as a Board of Health during a pandemic? But I'm sure Councillor Columbus would agree. I have no idea, even as the chair of the Board of Health at this point in time, what my role is. Like, we're not consulted on these decisions. We have no authority to overrule anything. So we're not running traditional public health programs right now in any capacity. So if we're not doing any of those things, what exactly is it, that we kind of do? So that's where this would also could potentially be put back on the province as well.
So even if he was asked to stay home for the remaining of the time being in that position, he would still be acting even if he was sitting at home. Is that the bottom line? And they would not step in at an earlier date if he was asked to stay home?
Correct. I would say that's, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're going to need somebody ultimately under the legislation. There would have to be somebody to rescind his directives and his orders.
Right. Any other questions from the board? So then, Mayor Chop, I'll get in touch with you, either myself or Ryder, or if anyone else from the board wants to step up to give the scenarios and give the synopsis for tomorrow, and then we'll get all that straightened up for before
Yeah,
tomorrow.
if a couple of you wanted to show up, that's fine too.
Okay.
We could each present a different real life scenario. You know, Jason, you could present yours with the taxis. You know, Dusty, you can present, you know, what your suggestion was to Shanker, you know, that was turned down. So if there's a couple of you that want to present some real life scenarios, you know, that'd be great.
Okay.
All right,
Mr. Garwood, is your hand up?
I'm going to jump off then, unless there's anything else for me.
I'm good.
I got one more quick question.
Yep.
Does it have to be someone on the Ag Advisory Board, or can it be someone in the ag community that's also went through some painful transportation issues?
If you want to invite them on behalf of the Ag Advisory Board, I would say go ahead. I think it's down on the agenda as the deputations from the Ag Advisory Board, I'm pretty sure. So if you want them to come and speak along with you, I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Chop.
Take care, guys. Thanks.
Have a good day. Mr. Garwood, I see your hand up, sir.
Thank you, Dusty. Just one suggestion as it pertains to the guys getting the shots. Most of the countries that these guys are coming from, we have some local organization. For example, you have the Barbados and Friends Association, you have the Jamaican Foundation, and so on. And even in our local communities, there are some amount of trepidation and scare about the vaccine. And so we have people going out in our community to say, here is why you should be taking the vaccine. And most of these groups, they would have coordination with their consul general, their high commissioners, their liaison officers, and so on. And I think that the same thing that they're doing in the community could be extended to like the workers on the farm. Because if I tell a guy from Jamaica in my language, this is why I'm taking it, and this is why you should really consider taking this, sometimes they might tend to listen to their own than somebody else. It might bring another aspect to it. So I suggest that probably we could also reach out to the local country organizations and see if they would be willing to spread the same word they're spreading in the community, extend it to the migrant workers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If they could send like a video, right? If they could pre-record a video that could be sent out to the farm operators, yeah. Yeah.
And that is something that I could reach out to the presidents of the different associations and see whether or not, and I'm pretty sure they would be more than happy to, whatever documents they have, and do a video or something like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chris. I think we'd appreciate that. Any comments on that from the board? Do we, like, is this something that we think would be something of use and of asset? Trish, thumbs up. Thank you. Hayden?
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. It's a great idea. Any way we could help or support, get messaging out like that'd be great.
Good. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that, sir.
I'll do that. Thanks.
Okay. So going back, just kind of stepping back a little bit out of the rabbit hole about the council presentation. We'll just focus on tomorrow's, and then we'll circle back with this once. It's low priority, and I believe our council is now more than ever up to date with what's going on with agriculture. Maybe I'm speaking for the board on that one. If anybody thinks opposite, but might just kick that down the road just a little bit. If there's any one that thinks otherwise. Okay. I believe we need to add, Jacob, one item, because I did have one item, is made some headway, and I need to make a deputation, hopefully at an upcoming council meeting. I'm gonna bounce this off of you, Councillor Columbus, regarding the 45 bridge. Kind of had some updates and some phone calls with some people that live in that area, that farm in that area, and got some practical widths after speaking with Anne. So thank you for that, and widths of tractors and what they're looking for. From my understanding, they would be very, very pleased with a single lane, 20 feet wide, and a built of concrete, because steel will rust and needs washing, etc. But a 20-foot wide single lane bridge. A single lane bridge right now is 14 feet wide, so we're asking for 3-foot shoulders on both sides, made of concrete. And that would accommodate modern agriculture. It's not meant to be driving combines across, but for getting most implements and getting that access route back online. If is anyone opposed to me taking forward a 20-foot width bridge to council? Before I do anything, obviously, I'll put the letter of support together and send it through to the board for it to chew on. Is everyone okay with that direction? Just so we can get this closed off, because now it's in Norfolk's ability to work with. Anne.
I think the other thing was too, when we were talking to growers, was more like the weight restriction, right? So you'd want to take, like Silvite would want 35 or 40 ton of fertilizer. A loaded grain train would be, upwards of 50 ton. So as long as it could handle that weight also.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, because you were talking with U-Hauses, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, perfect.
Dusty,
yeah, so the 20-foot wide and 50 ton. Say that again.
Dusty, Mike here. Just, this bridge has been in the works for over 4 years. And, I know a lot of growers are waiting for this to happen, and Anne's brought up a very good point about this tonnage, because Silvite there in Silver Hill, they are anxious to have this bridge open as well for their truck traffic. And the farmers, there's some farmers have to drive 8.5 kilometers around to get to their other farm. So they're getting impatient. I think you've heard from them also. So
so I'm going to get this together. I'll put together a document for you guys to approve, and then I'll get into the deputation if you're good with that, Councillor, and for the board.
For sure.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, you guys will have it expect it very, very soon, because it's like Groundhog Day with this bridge. So I appreciate everyone working on this. Okay, so Jacob, please add that to the tracking table. So we'll have 5 items. Any more comments on that? Well, we will have comments once I send the letter out. But okay. Agenda. Okay, we're getting near the end. I appreciate everyone's patience. Reports and new business. We did talk about the vaccine clinics and the trials. Any other new business arising?
So Dusty, just one more thing. Zvi had his hand up there for a while too. Don't know what.
Sorry,
trying to say something.
I don't know why I can't ever see
Yeah,
everybody.
no problem. Thanks, Hayden. I kind of put it back down because we moved past the topic a little bit, but I'll just provide a quick update. I was off last week, and I'm just catching up on some emails. And one of the emails that I got was from the SCORE, from Kim Earls at SCORE, and she was saying that the board had directed her to work with Councillor Van Passen to actually write a letter to Minister Hardeman and copy the other MPs and MPPs in the SCORE region, to discuss. Just looking through this real quick. So it's more about the inconsistencies in the regulations and in regards to the temporary foreign worker program. So I have a draft of that letter. It may or may not still be relevant given the discussions regarding Dr. Shanker and what's kind of transpired since then. But just they did recognize the challenges in Norfolk, and the board did direct her to support Norfolk County with this letter, and as I said, to work with Councillor Van Passen on that letter.
Okay, sounds good. So is this something you're going to circulate out our way?
Yeah, I'll send that out.
Okay. Zvi, while I have you on the spot, sir, I see TDAB is coming up in a minute. Sorry, it's actually let's talk about that item, and then we'll go to item 2. Anyone have comments about this letter? No. Okay. Look forward to seeing that, and yeah, absolutely. If SCORE is willing to support an even keel, that's great, because we have no idea what's happening after May 21st, and if we can apply the pressure already that we're looking for it to be equal, that's great. Zvi, the second thing is that because I see TDAB is coming up, just for the minutes for us to go over, did you want to speak on the Economic Recovery Task Force Subcommittee?
Yeah, sure. Let me go on camera here. So just a reminder for everyone in terms of context, we have the Economic Recovery Plan. The plan itself, there's a couple of, there's 4 parts to the plan. I think the part that Dusty's talking about is called Recover Norfolk, and that consists of 4 grant programs that were envisioned when the plan was put together. Those 4 grant programs, we've created a subcommittee for those programs to try tease out what those programs would look like, what would the structure be, what would the amount be for each of those programs, and within that, of course, one of those is for agriculture. So we had a pretty good meeting, and Dusty was there. A lot of really great input was provided on what might be helpful from an agriculture perspective. It's rather limited in size. We're looking at something in the $30,000 to $40,000 range to support the ag industry, and it's also intended to go to a non-for-profit that can support the industry as a whole. So since the meeting, as I said, lots of great feedback from the meeting. I've since then had a discussion with Nick Hinkle from OMAFRA to talk about where else I should go to get, to find a non-for-profit. He mentioned the Federation of Agriculture in Norfolk as one option, but mentioned some others as well, even potentially AAB. So that's something that I'm still researching, and what types of things might we want to fund. So he sent me a number of resources to look at what other municipalities have done, obviously what OMAFRA has done in the past with a much larger scope. So the next step for that is for once I've gone through that process, the subcommittee will reconvene, and I will come to them with proposals for what each of these 4 programs might look like. There's a downtown stimulus one, there's the ag one, there's one for tourism, and one for arts and culture. What would each of those programs look like? What would the criteria look like? And how do we roll this out? So that will be, I'm actually going to be sending out the minutes and next steps on that in probably today or tomorrow.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Zvi. That's great. Any comments from the board? Okay.
If there are any other non-profits that I should be approaching that might be able to kind of administer a program like this, more than happy to have that conversation with them.
Okay. Is great. Yeah. Perfect. Anything else, V?
You know what? There's some more pieces that are part of the economic recovery plan that I think have strong ties to opportunities within ag. We're not quite there yet. We're still probably a couple of months from getting to those parts of the plan. So I'll probably come back and talk about those. What I would ultimately love to see, and I kind of tried to allude to that at the last meeting, probably not very well, but what I would love to see is a little bit of what we do with TDAB, which is we identify a program and we work together on that. So, you know, it would be the advisory board, which is ultimately an advisory board, but also guiding us as staff and saying, hey, you've got funding for this, and here's an area of challenge. Can we use funding to solve this? Or it could be, you know, it could be any type of program really where we're basically collaborating with the Ag Advisory Board to achieve a very specific outcome that staff do most of the work, but you guys guide us on that. So I would love to get to a point where eventually we do have those kind of strategic pieces where we say, okay, what would we like to achieve in the next year or two that affects the entire industry or moves the industry forward? One of the big areas for me is innovation. How can we act as a catalyst, the county, to spur on more innovation? Is that funding? Is that innovation training? Is that creating some kind of collision space? There's a lot of different ways to do that, and I've reached out to some influencers and venture capitalists and angel investors who have deep domain and expertise in agriculture innovation. That would be one area that I'd love to collaborate on. Bring in maybe post-secondary. So those are some of those bigger, more audacious types of projects, but you know, something to consider for down the line.
For sure. Okay, I love it. Good. All right. Any questions for Zvi, and also before we close out new business?
Yeah, Dusty.
Hey.
Just on that. I was just listening to what Zvi's talking about there. $30,000 to $40,000 isn't a lot of money. One thing that's happened here throughout this season, and I'm trying to put my head around this at the moment and say, hey, how can we like we did a lot of these appreciation events, the football games and other stuff. We've got away from some of those community gatherings that we had for supporting the temporary foreign workers. How could we, if you're talking about economic drivers, that they're a big part of agricultural businesses here in Norfolk County, and just to get the face out there and do some more of those support themes there, put some of those functions together. I see that as a great benefit to everybody that has agricultural workers, and a benefit to the agricultural workers themselves. If we're looking at economic drivers, they're a big part of it. They've been through some pretty tough times here. They've been pushed to the limit on some stuff, and it's time for us to recognize the fact that we need to be supporting these guys more and making sure that they understand that they're important to our businesses. So anyway, that's just food for thought, Zvi. I think it'd be a really great use of some funds if they were available to put some projects together around temporary foreign workers.
Okay, thanks for that. And who was involved with that in the past?
Dusty, you understand the players there better than myself. We've got Sinkowski, Carrie, is it?
Yeah, Carrie Sinkowski. She was heading the Football Federation of Norfolk, something like that. But there was a great soccer tournament, ran 3 years, FNFA, I believe. And then Carrie was also the before the pandemic struck. There was talk of working with TDAB and someone like Carrie from the Norfolk Federation of Football, to almost like what does like a red carpet welcome for these guys into this year. And so, you know, so how do we create that's not single events, that there's excitement leading up, that when they even get here and the guys are making their teams, they have some sort of welcome package, a welcome wagon, so to speak. So Carrie was working on that, and I mean, it was huge. But we can't do large groupings. Something that, you know, that is in a bag even, that would be something until we can reconvene. Trish?
Wasn't there also a carnival night that not only brought the temporary foreign workers in and created an atmosphere there, but it also brought the community in and tried to tie everybody together? Was that Carrie that was working on that?
Yeah, that was through Culture Rodeo. I forgot about that. Yeah. Culture Rodeo is downtown Simcoe. Give me a second.
Would that be Tanya Van Roy?
Tanya, yes.
Yeah, that's who did that.
Anita.
I mean, it's a great idea. I know we can't do it right now with the pandemic, but it's a way that they're going to feel more welcome in the community when everyone's, getting together in one spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and
Good
just
ideas. So,
and on that note, yeah, we can't get together and support them, but we can support them with doing things with social media at the moment. And maybe that's a good way to access those populations and start saying thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sorry, Dusty, if I may, it's Nick here. And so I've been listening in on Carrie's group there. And so they have they're working on a number of different ideas. So it's probably a good idea to invite them to your next meeting to speak on it. Or again, Zvi can connect with Carrie around that for some ideas.
Yeah, I love it. I love for
that.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Because that's the stuff we're going to have to get back to, is once we have all these policies in place and all the nitty gritty negative stuff, let's get let's send it now back outbound and lead the messaging. I love it. Okay, so we'll invite Carrie to speak at our next meeting, if that's good with everyone. In the meantime, I'll have we chat every now and then just about various things. I'll reach out to Carrie. Okay. Anything else in this item? Okay. Love it, guys. That's beautiful. Okay. So under other business, the TDAB minutes are attached from the March 17th meeting. If everyone had an opportunity just to take a look at those. Where are you? Any questions that came up from the board? Actually, I should also say, yes, Councillor.
Just to mention that the title there says it's Health and Social Services, just for Jacob to correct that. Did you get that,
okay.
Jacob?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Jacob, was there any comment from TDAB from our meeting when they received our minutes that they had to send our way from that meeting?
Not that I can recall.
Okay, good deal.
I will make sure that they get the meeting or the minutes from this meeting as well.
Perfect. Thank you kindly. Yeah, everything looks fine. That's great. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. We're going on 2 hours. So if I could give me 1 second here. But there we go. Okay. So I believe that is our last item, our next meeting. So right now, so just to confirm, everyone, if you have any comments, please send through questions regarding Adam Biddle's draft bylaw. Anita, thank you for getting in touch and finding out who's on that and leading that subcommittee at the Woodlot Owners Association to see, what sort of paralleling communication that we can join forces on or understand where they're coming from, because I will be fully transparent and with everyone that I'm very let's just say ignorant when it comes to this. I don't know a lot, so I would like to get caught to speed for where one side is and where potentially another side is at. Hayden?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt you there. Just finish what you're saying and then come back to me.
Good. And then I'm going to, yes, now that speaking with some of the property owners along the Bailey Bridge area and from Trish's information from Sylvite, etc., I'm going to be putting together a letter to be approved by the board to send up to council, looking for a deputation for a 20-foot wide single lane bridge made of concrete to support at least 50 tons. And then, yeah, I'm going to see who is going to be getting in touch. Oh, so Mr. Garwood's going to be getting in touch with the Friends of Barbados, Friends of Jamaica to see about the videos. And then Nick, are you able to get in touch with Carrie to see if she can get in touch with Zvi or myself to talk about what sort of programs are running, and then we can invite her to our next meeting?
Oh, no problem.
Sorry, Nick.
Oh.
Yeah.
There we go. Yes, I can do that. No problem.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Trish?
I was just going to ask Chris, are you reaching out to Mexico as well? Because they're another big country that has workers come up here.
The ones that I know are Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Barbados. I am not so familiar with the Mexican ones, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Where could, just so we can offer those resources, I wonder, I don't want to ask anything more of Sue Williams, but at farms, or is anyone at farms that would potentially know if there's something like that from like a Mexican board or anything like that?
I could do some research where that is concerned as well and let you know. But if we have other people who can take it from other angles, that would help. But for sure, I will try and use my resources and find out if there's one such organization. I'm pretty sure there would be.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. That's a really good point, Trish. I just sent out the OFEGA link, the vaccine info link. So just go through there. You can scroll through. There's a lot of info there. And it's presented very well. Okay, well, for somebody trying to step down, looks like I filled my plate back up, so this is fun. So here we go. Okay, I see. Mr. Hoog. You're on mute. There we go.
Sorry, yeah, they're just wondering whether the Mexican consulate would have any information as to speaking to the guys about vaccines. And the Jamaican consulate too should have an opinion on it, that they should be able to help. That's what they're there for. I don't know if anybody's
right.
I personally never thought about it, but I don't know whether we could ask the consulates to help. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not.
Yeah, most of the consulate offices would have what they call a liaison officer that would go out and ensure the well-being of the workers, and I'm pretty sure that the liaison officer would be able to assist.
Okay. Okay. So that's there. Hayden, what would you, what were you going to say, sorry?
Yeah, just if we've got any situations that we think would add value to discuss with the Board of Health when you go to the meeting, is the best way, or from ourselves, if we take the Ag Advisory Board and let's say everybody's heard a story, 3 different stories, if they can put those 3 different stories in an email and send it off to you, is that the best way to get some more information to you, some more real life stories for the presentation to the Board of Health?
I think so. That's a really good point, Hayden. Just so, because I know, like, Trish, you probably have like from everyone that you work with, lots of horror stories this spring already and things that you're dealing with, or anyone else that's on the board. Mark, I'm looking at you, or others. Please send those through today. Just a Cole's notes of different experiences you've had with, because of being in Norfolk. Please send those through, and I'll present those to Phil, to make sure that all different hypotheticals or real lives can be communicated to Shanker. It's a good point, Hayden.
Sounds good. I'll pull
something
together for you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Okay, and then in regards to the tree, we just want to cycle back to there. The reason why I'm bringing about this is it's all about the next meeting date. It seems like we might benefit from doing another meeting and have before the April 31st comment deadline. That way we can maybe bring in the Woodlot Owners Association or obviously Mr. Mike Penner to give a presentation. By then, we'll also have updates from a couple things as well. We can get another meeting up before planting begins really heavily. So is anyone opposed to that line of thinking? So if we look to have a meeting, honestly, in 3 weeks' time, either the 26th through the 30th, or Councillor Columbus, when? So the next council meeting is when, sir? Or Jacob?
Tomorrow.
Dusty, we have a hearing board meeting Wednesday, and then the following Tuesday we have a council and committee meeting, which is the 13th of April. And then the following week, the 20th, is a full council meeting.
Okay. And
That
Jacob, is the agenda for that 20th?
I believe the last week of the month there will be open at this point, unless something special is called.
Okay. So has the agenda building for the 20th council meeting been closed?
I don't
know. The building of the agenda generally isn't done until the 6th. It wouldn't be done until the Friday before, and then even the Monday prior if we have some late submissions as well.
Oh. Okay, because then I'll look to then having the letter formulated and approved by the board via email regarding the 45 bridge to have the deputation the 20th, and then we can have results in the deputation for the meeting at the very end of April, which then gives time for the woodlot owners of presentation. And then that meeting can be clean. We can bang out a couple things, and they don't have to run this long if that works for everybody.
Part of the problem is, Dusty, is deputations take place at council and committee, and that would take place. That's happening next week on the 13th.
Okay, so can I still slide into that?
Yeah, you have time to get into that if needed. Yeah, absolutely. But that's when they do deputations.
Okay, sounds good. I will work on this letter. I love it. So then let's put next meeting week of. If I'm gonna be Dutch for a second. It is week 18, so the 26th to the 30th.
Yeah, I would suggest I would suggest we pick a date now. Pick a date and time now would probably be the best course of action.
Does that week work for everyone? Is there any issues with that date? With that week, I should say.
I'm booked on Tuesday morning. I can't be there.
How about middle of the week? Does Wednesday work?
Perfect.
Okay. We'll put it right now at the 28th, if that works. Seeing none and any issues, email it through and then we can slide it if we need to the Thursday or the Friday.
Will that be a 9 a.m. start, Dusty? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, start my morning with everyone here. Beautiful. Okay, can I get a motion for adjournment? Trish? Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll be speaking very soon.